The things that set us apart really are the lowest common denominator. I like the Niners. I don't know what team you really like. Stupid stuff. And people will, I mean, look at the soccer games in England. People will tear each other apart.
Yeah.
Because they have a football game, you know? I think it's the stupid stuff that we put names and labels around that really divide us. When you get to the really important stuff, children, family, we have visions of humanity working together and living together as one. Yeah. Creativity and the possibility of artistic endeavor. So if we can access our higher natures, where really is at the highest level, there's nothing that separates us. It's just when we break it down to the stupid stuff and we attach importance to that we begin to find fission.
Dr. Jeff Salz has spent a lifetime changing people's lives for the better, as he inspires us to look at life from fresh perspectives and guides us to dare to be more than we might ever have thought we could be. When Jeff was 16 years old, life in New Jersey had become too small for what would become his lifetime quest for adventure. He dropped out of high school and headed west to attend a small alternative education college in Prescott, Arizona. Not one to, as he puts it, let his schooling interfere with his education. The majority of Jeff's coursework were adventures, officially titled Independent Studies. So, at the age of 17, he was already traveling the world alone, ice climbing in the southern Alps of New Zealand and living on vampire bats in the jungles of New Caledonia. He spent his 19th year exploring the Andes of South America and completing some of the toughest climbs on the continent, from Peru to Patagonia. At the age of 23, with a PhD in cultural education, Jeff was invited to join the faculty of San Diego State University, which is where I first met Jeff as a student in one of his classes in 1980. Over the last 20 years, Jeff has become an internationally respected speaker and leadership coach. His book, The Way of Adventure, Transforming Your Life and Work with Spirit and Vision, has been called an operating manual for every aspect of your personal and professional life. I know Jeff is not only a skilled executive leadership expert, and as a partner in our organizational training work together with organizations like Microsoft, Google, eBay, and the Walt Disney Company, but also as a best friend for the past 34 years. I'm Chess Edwards, and this is Beyond the Noise, conversations at the heart of modern-day living. I interviewed Jeff at my home in San Diego, California on August 8, 2014. I wanted to interview you today, Jeff, for a couple of reasons. One is because of the work that you do and, you know, how many lives you impact. It's always been something that is inspired me to see how much impact you have on so many people. But the other reason is, and I think we should let people know this, you and I have known each other for, 34 years now? Something like that, 34, 35 years.
Too long.
But only by like a month too long now, I think. And I find it fascinating as I was preparing and looking at the questions that I wanted to ask. I find it fascinating that even knowing you for as long as I have, and you and I being best friends, that there's things that I don't know about you.
Oh, and I'm going to tell the world the things that I don't choose to tell you?
No, it's just that in these types of conversations, you know, this is an opportunity for us to really, you know, have even a more intimate conversation than perhaps we typically have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was fascinated to have you.
Sure. Well, there are things that we don't talk about because we sort of assume that we know. And this is an interesting format in which we can discover in each other things perhaps we would not ordinarily choose to discuss.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Exactly. I'm down with the premise.
Perfect. So I know a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up. And I'm really interested to discover more about what was the environment like that you grew up in, because the life that you've had doesn't seem like it would typically come out of a New Jersey lifestyle with an accountant father. And I know your childhood was steeped in a lot of television and entertainment and music and such. So what was it that as you look back, what was part of that environment or lifestyle that you think had an impact on who you've become in life?
Now, actually, as you say that, I reflect back, and I think growing up in a suburban New Jersey environment in the 50s, it was really leave it to Beaver. So it was fairly isolated and insulated from the major realities of life.
Right.
And everything was vicarious. Like you say, we watched TV. We actually would go to Broadway and see Broadway shows, but it was all insulated by this warm parental cocoon, and beyond that was this societal cocoon. And we went on vacation trips and we would see the world, but from nicely appointed hotels and little tours.
Yeah.
So, I think to me it seemed like, why would anyone not choose to go beyond that into the world of remarkable experience? So I think maybe, as you mentioned that, I think for me it was, I began to make up stories at an early point of life, like when I was 6, saying, oh, I was on a pirate ship and I did this and I did that. And it began to become clear to me that as I grew up, I could actually maybe find a pirate ship. So I think that there was a gap between what the world presented and what I knew I would experience if I lived in New Jersey versus if I got out of here, I could become the protagonist of the stories that I saw portrayed on, not Leave It to Beaver, but on other television shows like Jim Bowie or Yancey Derringer or the Wildlife Show, whatever it was, or the books I read or the Broadway shows I saw. I think my commitment was to not live a secondary existence, to live a primary and direct existence in the larger picture of life.
So there was a part of you that was naturally drawn to the more, would you say some of the television you watched and the music you listened to had a edge quality to it? Like it was something beyond the norm? It wasn't Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah. I mean, Twilight Zone. I wanted to live Twilight Zone, at least to explore the dimensions beyond worlds. I mean, I wound up studying shamanism because those early influences of what's real and what's not real. I mean, those things came from the Outer Limits, and programs like that. Or so yes, I don't. But the real question is, why did I do that and others didn't? I mean, I have friends that are no longer my friends who still live in New Jersey. And to me, that's insanity. They may say what Salz is doing on those mountains in the Himalayas, even at his advanced age, that's insanity. I say to still be living in New Jersey, that's insanity.
Did your parents see it as insanity? As this part of you, it was clearly becoming evident to them of our child is interested in strange and bizarre things. Was there support there?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was a geography teacher. And we did do a lot. No idea could be brought up that wasn't somehow investigated in the World Book Encyclopedia. So I did live in a intellectually curious family, and I would say there was an appreciation for the value of direct experience, like traveling to Europe when I was 13 years old. We rented a little minivan and we drove around, didn't know where we were going to spend the night. So there was an appreciation, but I think I wanted to take it to the next level.
Yeah.
I didn't want to just have it be touring. I wanted to be seriously invested in the outcome and deeply involved in the culture and the landscape.
Right. Well, and that's been your life pursuit, has always been cultures and the influence of cultures on each other and what can we learn from other cultures. Was there a cultural aspect to your home environment when you were a kid? Because you're Jewish. Was that predominant? Was there a kind of a sense of culture growing up?
That's interesting. I've never thought about that, but yes, we were somewhat different than mainstream America, and I didn't really know what it was.
Yeah.
We weren't practicing Jews. We didn't go to the temple ever, but we definitely had a culture, the way Italians in West Orange, New Jersey, had a culture, and the Irish kind of had a culture around certain holidays. Yeah. So I think, yes, early on I became aware of the cultural aspect and how a culture determined our thought patterns and our experience of the realities of life.
Yeah.
So I think my anthropological instinct probably came from an appreciation that depending upon the world we came from, our view of worlds in general was altered.
And when you left West Orange, New Jersey. You went straight to Prescott College, alternative education college in Prescott, Arizona. Is that you went straight from New Jersey to Prescott?
Yeah, at the age of 16, I dropped out of high school and went to college.
What did you have a sense as you look back on it now? Were you moving towards something more or away from something?
Oh, I was definitely. I mean, I had a marvelous family and a great life growing up. I mean, there were no deaths, divorces, car accidents.
Right.
There was just a loving family. So no, I was just moving toward more goodness, more aliveness, more wakefulness, more experience. I wanted to be. Nature really drew me. I was going in the summer on these outdoor traveling summer expeditions.
Right.
And we went rock climbing and we discovered fossils and found petrified wood and woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and stood with the Native Americans on the Hopi mesas and we got to be participants in their dances. So I wanted to move that way. And west was obviously the direction where all that was taking place.
Right. So was your initial attraction wilderness? It sounds like perhaps it was more wilderness oriented. You
Yes.
wanted to go see the big world, but along the way you encountered all these other cultures. You know, do you think your initial impetus was wilderness and you were surprised to find there were other cultures out there, or was that part of it as well, that you wanted to go, find other people?
No, it was entirely, I wanted to be a wilderness instructor, be a mountain climbing instructor, be a mountain guide.
Yeah.
I wanted to spend time alone in the wilds and discover, as Thoreau said, what were the true depths and meanings of life, not to have a life where at the end I said I'd never lived at all. So it was all John Muir, Henry David Thoreau, Joseph Wood Crouch. It was all about me and the wilds. Yeah, and as you say, it was during, I think, probably my first major expedition to South America around 1972 and 73, when I began seeing these crazy Bolivian peasants doing their wild dances,
Right.
and meeting the gauchos in Patagonia, and discovering even in Chile, being part of that fabric of the political, poetic reality during the Allende years, and seeing that destroyed by a counter-revolution and the imposition of fascism. All that awakened me to the magic and the wilderness of the human experience. So I think the wilderness took me. In fact, I was in Chile during the revolution, and I escaped death probably because I was a dumb mountain climber.
Right.
But as a dumb mountain climber, I wasn't involved in politics, but I witnessed that, and it changed me forever. So that was my progression: New Jersey, wilderness, wild places, wild people.
Right. And how long were you at Prescott College?
Basically, I graduated in 5 years.
Okay. And during that 5 years, you were already doing, because of the nature of Prescott College, you were already doing expeditions. You were starting to travel through the college experience.
Yep. I spent 6 months at the age of 17 in New Zealand in the South Pacific, working on different sheep ranches, climbing the big ice mountains there on the South Island, living in the jungles in New Caledonia. That's where I turned 18. Right. And then I went to Patagonia and climbed there in Peru, 1920, and by 21 I graduated.
All right. When did you start? I met you at San Diego State University, and that was in 1980 when I met you, and you had already been teaching there for a couple of years.
Yes.
How long was it after graduating Prescott College and then going out? And you spent how many years just traveling and exploring the world before you started working at San Diego State?
Only really 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did it surprise you that you were able to get that? But first of all, what inspired you to get a quoted job of that nature, at a university, at an institution?
I didn't want a job. I just wanted an experience.
Okay.
So the first time I taught that class, they had a very small class, and they wanted me to come in and do some guest lectures, which I did. And then the second year they said, you know what, we'd like you to come back and teach the class, but we can't pay you anything. Wouldn't that be fun? I said, sure, this is great. No responsibility, no pay. I can create the curriculum. And so, as you probably knew, the class grew from 100 to 200 to 350 students.
Yeah.
And I love saying to the students, hey, I'm not getting paid to be here. You're going to get credit for attending. There are no adults present. let's have some fun.
So they took, I mean, they had no idea the monster they were creating by actually taking the limit off of you by saying, look, we're not paying you, therefore you really don't have to do what we say.
And I have nothing to lose. What, are they going to stop paying me? They can't fire me. They never hired me. And we got into great stuff. I mean, I took it seriously. I don't mean to be, frivolous about this. The opportunity to impact these minds of San Diego State students. I was only 23 years old.
Yeah.
And I could share with them the crazy notions that were in my mind. And the students recognized them as really their own notions in many respects. So it began to have this exploratory journey expedition in the confines of a classroom where I never presented answers, but always presented questions and possibilities for exploration.
Yeah. Well, it changed my life. It absolutely changed my life coming out of high school and going to college and starting as a theater major, drama major, and then I took your course, which I think was called Wilderness and the Leisure Experience.
It was called Wilderness and the Human Experience, and later on they put the word leisure in there for some kind of administrative reason.
So they did that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been making up this story all along about why it was called that. It was a brilliant idea of yours. So Wilderness and the Human Experience was the tenor of the class.
Yes.
And it opened up my eyes to all sorts of other possibility. And that's what it seemed like the class was about the willingness to look at other possibilities. What's your reflection back? What was that class about? I know you created it for a certain reason, but in looking back, what was it really about? What was the impact of that class?
Well, I think there's a certain conceit in being human, where evolution has led us to the point where we now, as humanity, exist. And it's a double conceit. The first conceit is that the world exists for the pleasure of serving humanity, which is a dangerous proposition for multifold reasons, multiplicity of reasons. The second conceit is that we have evolved to this place we are now, and here we are, sitting on our laurels, on top of the evolutionary chain, when the truth is, we're just a little step in the R&D of genetics, So we're definitely a work in progress. So I wanted to present, I think, those two ideas. One, that we are the creators of our own evolution through the choices that we make.
Right.
And second, that there's a world to which we belong, that the earth does not belong to us, but we belong to the earth. And when you have that awareness, it really it informs the decisions and choices we make every day.
Well, you took, my remembrance was that you took the idea of the expanse of the wilderness, Thoreau and the people who really taught us about how to see beyond ourselves. And my experience was you helped teach us to see that wilderness within ourselves. So there's a larger sense of possibility even within us as well.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. We're an untapped resource to ourselves.
Right. In looking at, I kind of looked back over your life in preparation for this. And one thing that stood out for me.
My life flashed before your eyes.
Right. Which says something about my life, I think. That your life flashed before my eyes. And that was that it seems that you've always put yourself in situations where you didn't necessarily belong, where you were the outsider. And that has been a theme throughout. So go down to Patagonia and you end up spending quite a bit of time with the gauchos. A kid from New Jersey who's hanging with the gauchos. San Diego State University, you become a professor at San Diego State University who ultimately you were fired, ultimately, as I think the president called you an attractive nuisance.
The most attractive nuisance on campus.
Exactly. But you were like the fish.
I'm just excited he found me attractive.
You were the fish out of water there. You were the fish out of water in China, riding with the Kampa nomads in China.
And the Kazakhs of Xinjiang.
Yes. And then your work moved you into the corporate environment. So here again, you're coming in as the outsider, lending a sense of perspective. But it seems like your entire life has been as stepping into and finding some way of being comfortable as the person who didn't quite belong.
I think, again, goes back to wilderness, to enter into a wild, untamed, and unknown environment, and to find yourself comfortably and perhaps even competently moving through that environment is an incredible uplift, an uplift of soul and spirit, because you discover this dark and forbidding place. Really, you shine your little light in there, and suddenly it's not full of wolves that will eat you, but you have to be careful.
Yeah.
But it's a place you can belong. So I think going to the gauchos, these wild men on horseback, getting the little outfit and getting the dog and the horses and all that, ultimately making friends and being accepted. Where finally, I know you know the story, at the very end of my journey there, I'm sitting in a small boliche, little tavern by the side of the road, and the tourists from Buenos Aires send their kids up, there's a gaucho, talk to him, talk to him. Little kids saying,
I didn't know that
oh,
story.
really?
No.
Oh, Senor Gaucho, where are you from, Senor? I am from New Jersey. And I was so honored, and in Tibet, where actually the Chinese people along the way, the little shops, wouldn't sell me food or help me because they thought I was a dirty Tibetan. So it's like to move into these environments that seem so other, and to discover how one can be same as. What an uplifting thing. So even to enter into corporate America, when you and I are sitting with the top C-suite executives at Microsoft and discovering they're curious about us, we can speak the same language, we have something to offer them and they to us. I mean, if there ever was a them, it's the guys that run Microsoft or Google. And suddenly, these guys are our buds, our pals. We're drinking, we're eating Mexican food, we're going to barbecue, right? And they're just like us. So I would say a lot of this journey is to kind of uncover the darkest, distant, most seemingly unsympathetic aspects of the world, geographical and cultural, and by thrusting oneself into that environment, discover wholeness, completion, congruence, acceptance. That's probably been the journey.
It sounds like I've heard you define adventure as doing things we've done before, but in ways we've never done them before. And it feels like in this context that adventure is also the willingness to bust the myths. The myth of us and them. That there's an adventure in kind of, you've been busting myths your entire life.
Before there was a TV show.
Is there a TV show now, Busting Myths?
Something like
Mythbusters,
that.
the Mythbusters, yes. So once again, way ahead of your time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. I do think you've hit on the real key. If people ask me now what I'm interested in, it's the work I'm doing with my friend Aleppo. I know you know Aleppo Deng, formerly one of the Lost Boys of Sudan. And in the work that I think we agree, he's been through such hell. And what we've come up with is realization that the biggest challenge I believe we both see, or I know we both see, and we both believe we face on the planet at this moment, is exactly what you said, that divisiveness, this consciousness that there's us and there's a them, there's a Sunni and there's a Shiite, there's a Jew and there's a Palestinian, there's a Nuer tribesman in Sudan, and there's a Dinka tribesman, and how in I was in Yugoslavia, I was actually in Kosovo before the whole thing fell apart in Yugoslavia, and I saw them all, and they seemed to see each other as brothers, and suddenly, boom, the harshest, most genocidal acts ever committed take place. How can we get beyond this tendency to pull ourselves apart, this fusion? And find a way or this fission, and replace it with the beauty, the possibility, and the grace of fusion, because both produce energy, possibility, and are sources of excitement.
Right. Yeah. So, it's the connection. It's finding a way to experience and see and be willing to see a connection. Between the others, and is it in the willingness? What's the key? What's the key to being able to see others as ourselves?
Well, one thing that Aleppo and I are presenting in the work that we're doing now, we call it the highest common denominator. The things that set us apart really are the lowest common denominator. I like the Niners. I don't know what team you really like. Stupid stuff. And people will, look at the soccer games in England. People will tear each other apart. Because they have a football game, I think it's the stupid stuff that we put names and labels around that really divide us. When you get to the really important stuff, children, family, we have visions of humanity working together and living together as one. Creativity and the possibility of artistic endeavor. So if we can access our higher natures, where really is at the highest level, there's nothing that separates us. It's just when we break it down to the stupid stuff,
Yeah.
and we attach importance to that, that we begin to find fission.
It feels like we feel safer. Like the myth here is I'm safer if I can isolate. Within my culture, within my clan, within my tribe or my group. And if I go outside of that, I'm unsafe. And that's such a primitive way of thinking. And it probably used to be true.
Yeah. I mean, there's reason for tribes. I think as human beings have evolved, their tribal size has grown. So once it was a 10 group, it became a 25 group. And then by the Paleolithic, you had larger groups, et cetera, et cetera. Our tribes have now expanded where now they're nation states, or they are comprised of a whole religion. But I think the next step is to us to transcend even the size we currently hold as a tribe. And, people posit, what if the extraterrestrials were to arrive with lasers and big green heads from spaceships?
Yeah.
We would become one tribe. It wouldn't matter if we were black, white, as long as we weren't green.
Yeah, that's still the frontier. I don't know if we're ready to go there yet.
But then if we got together with the Martians, because we're getting attacked by a force from the Andromeda galaxy, hey, we're from this solar system. Let's get together. Maybe that's what the Star Wars and the Star Trek realities are all about, where you see, Spock, who's from some different place. And, because there is a conceptualization that when faced by a danger, we who are closest unite. So maybe we need not an extraterrestrial to attack us, but an awareness of global climate change. An awareness of the impending melting of the ice caps and the pollution and the inevitable destruction of the species through nationalism to draw us together and say, enough of this already. We have met the enemy and he is us, as Walt Kelly, who wrote Pogo, used to say.
Yeah, exactly. It's unfortunate, perhaps, that oftentimes the rallying cry or the point of commonality is a tragedy. Global warming, lack of water, resources, war, that we look at, that we can be drawn together over, if we work together, we can avoid this tragedy. And I'm just wondering if there's more opportunity to let possibility be our guide, rather than avoidance of tragedy, but possibility be our guide. And what is the possibility if we see ourselves as the other? That it's not just, it'll avoid a lot of pain and difficulty. But what's the positive? What do we get? What do we get?
Well, I'm a pessimistic, realist, idealist. I mean, I look at my own body, when my knees are starting to really hurt, I say, time to take some weight off. When I wake up really groggy in the morning, I better start drinking more juice and water. Yeah. I do think it's like when we put our finger on the stove, we feel pain. That pain is the response to an unfavorable environment. Right. And it's through pain that we grow. So, if you keep your thumb on that stove too long, that's just stupid. You're going to lose your thumb. But the first intimation of extreme heat, perhaps even before you touch the stove, you go, whoa, that's going to be a bad deal. So I do think we learn through suffering, but the amount of suffering we have to engage in really depends on the amount of stupidity that we are still stuck in,
Yeah. So suffering is a natural state of things, but too much suffering is just stupid.
Yeah, right. And a sign that the organism probably should go extinct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your work with corporations, you and I have done a lot of trainings together. Your primary work is as a motivational, inspirational speaker. Is there another way you describe that nowadays?
Not without sounding cheesy. There's no way to describe what I do without sounding cheesy.
No, there's really not. What would be the cheesy way to describe it?
Oh, motivational speaker Jeff Salz.
Yeah.
That is. I mean, the motivational speaker is kind of that's the punchline for almost any joke you want to create.
Right. So what are you doing? So take the title out of it. What's your work within organizations?
I would say I'm a cosmic cheerleader. Without the outfit, of course.
Yes, much less cheesy.
No, I'm visionary, mytho-poet, Adventure. I like to think of myself
Yeah.
as an adventurer, redefining the definition of adventure, where it's no longer going outward to see what's possible, to go inward to see what's possible, and the outward circumstance can catalyze the inward process. And then I like to present to large groups or small groups, but to get people in groups and teams thinking about what they might do together and how they might alter their own lives in the process to make their lives and the outcome of whatever they're working on more successful.
What are you learning from, because I know that you meet a lot of amazing people, heads of organizations, heads of departments. I mean, you typically are working with the upper echelon, the C-level, and the executive groups. And there's a lot of wonderful people in those positions. And I think it's become easy to demonize corporations these days. And ultimately corporations, while corporations may not be people, depending on your mindset, but they're certainly comprised of nothing but people.
Yeah.
What are the best leaders that you're encountering these days? How are they approaching their work, their service, and the cultures that they lead? What are they doing different? What are the best leaders doing that's working?
Well, it's a great question. And I don't know if this is true or if I want this to be true.
Yeah.
But I think exactly as you say, organizations are comprised of individuals. And they often tend to the work in front of them. Of course, the work of the CEO is to have the numbers work better next quarter and the quarter after that. Mm-hmm. As long as our nose is right against that grindstone and we're just taking care of our immediate environment, I think we're screwed. Mm. It's when, the corporate head and the individuals are aligned around what is the place of this organization or this organism, if you would, in the scope of the world. So not only are we making our numbers, but are we making a difference? Yeah. I do think, and it's a little bit of a cliche, that when you do good, mm-hmm. you do well. And mm-hmm. people and leaders who have found a way to, can I put this, to engage an organization, also engage the power of purpose and conviction and idealism, they move the entire organization forward in powerful ways that do result in better numbers. I see a book right in the room, Conscious Capitalism. Yeah. I would have scoffed at that back in my college days. Mm. But now I don't know what that book says, but I'll bet you it's about if we become conscious human beings and conscious how our actions affect those around us mm-hmm. and follow those connections further and further out, then we can make decisions that make sense not just now, but make sense for the future. And we can do really well in both.
So forward-thinking leaders really at the edge of conscious evolution or corporate evolution, they are willing to, what are they willing to do?
Take risks, mm-hmm. Be vulnerable, yeah. Insist on transparency, get information from the grassroots, mm-hmm. never lose their humanity, mm-hmm. stay in good shape physically, mentally, spiritually. A client of mine at United Airlines once said it's easy. The best people make the best leaders. So I don't think it's self-indulgent to really tend to your own garden. Right. In fact, I think logotherapy, Viktor Frankl, when we have a sense of belonging to a larger vision, mm-hmm. it's easier to tend to our own garden, take better care of ourselves. Yeah. So it all works together. I know I wake up in the morning, and when I get too self-indulgent, my day is just falls apart. Mm-hmm. But when I wake up and I say, right, I've got this thing I'm doing with these people that I care about, and we have this vision for the future, there's that lumda, the Tibetan wind behind in your wings that carries you forward. Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's been our trajectory all along as well, is, you'll be really taking care of yourself. When you were living up in Idlewild and here in California, every morning up, climbing the mountain every single day. And if there were times where I was letting myself go and not paying as much attention to my vitality, you'd be my inspiration. And so I'd get my act together and I'd really become vital and vibrant. And then 2 months later, we'd be talking again and you'd be down.
And you'd say, I'm on the 18th day of my juice fast.
Right.
And I'd be eating cotton candy ice cream or whatever for breakfast. And I go, right. Got to get back on it. Yeah. So that's, I think, close friendships, alliances give us the strength. We can do for another what we can't do consistently for ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. So that vulnerability as well within organizations, to be able to be seen, to be witnessed, and allow that to allow our those we lead to see our humanity, can be really inspiring.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
The word adventure has become synonymous with the name Jeff Salz. His book, The Way of Adventure, is largely considered the definitive word on adventure. But Jeff's life and work embraces a larger view of adventure than the classic Indiana Jones motif. Jeff says, quote, "Adventure is my spiritual path, pushing emotional, physical, and intellectual limits while inspiring others to do the same. Adventure is having the courage to follow your soul's calling." I have always known Jeff to embody the spirit of adventure and not just the actions of an adventurer. And it is his boundless zeal, huge heart, and relentless enthusiasm for exploration and discovery that has made him one of the most sought-after speakers and team facilitators in the world. Your book, The Way of Adventure, and it's The Way of Adventure, and what is the transform your life and work with spirit and vision. And in that you've got 6 steps. And you and I have worked these quite a bit with the different clients we've worked with. And I want to review and look at those 6 steps, only just to name them, because what I'm curious about is which of those, now that you've spent so much time speaking about those and helping guide people through these perspectives, in where you are now in life, which step has really lasted or the test of time? Which one still is the most poignant for you?
Which one's appropriate for me now?
Yeah.
So listeners at home or in their cars, this is a test that we often do with our audiences. So Ches Edwards very cleverly is throwing it back on me.
Yes, I am. So here are the steps. Leap before you look. And the idea, of course, being to take action before you necessarily are guaranteed that the action is going to be successful. Aim higher than Everest. Take big risks. You're going to fail sometimes, but even if you do, you're going to hit a higher mark than aiming for mediocrity. So leap before you look, aim high, give it all you've got, which is around giving more than you receive. Being willing to give back to life consistently more than you receive. Work some magic. Being willing to be, and that's the creative essence.
Trust your imagination.
Beautiful.
Believe in the world that exists beyond your current capacity to imagine it.
Keep on your bearing is the next one. So keep on your bearing to recognize that you're going to have failure. You're going to hit hardship. The storms are going to blow in, but to really keep on your bearing. And then enjoy the view. What's it all about if you're not enjoying it along the way? So those are the 6 steps. Which of those for you really has lasted through the test of time?
It's easy. Actually, I listened and I really went through a little experimentation in my mind, my little internal survey.
Yeah.
And it was clear. Ringing answer, enjoy the view.
Wow.
Enjoy the view.
Yeah.
The others to me are modus operandi. They're ways to make it through the expedition. But ultimately, maybe because I'm past 60 now, it's, the most important thing is never, and I'm getting tingles saying this, so I know it's true for me. For me, at this point in my life, don't miss a single moment's opportunity. Don't miss a breath. Don't miss a moment of my children growing up. Don't miss a minute of appreciation. I'm here with my good friend Ches Edwards. There's such a there's a finitude, I think that's a word, to life's experience. If it isn't, we just made it up.
Yeah.
And we only get so many breaths. And to miss out on savoring any one of them could be a huge tragedy. And everything else will sort itself out. It'll all be fine.
Yeah. Well, I think if I remember correctly, that's typically what you and I found was the most lacking aspect in any organization we worked with, was the willingness to take time to celebrate.
We always found that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Even on the most successful teams that knew they were losing energy, there was a lot of inertia and entropy happening. They wondered why. And that seemed to be the step that they were lacking on. In this driven world in which we live, this product driven, this performance driven, this success driven, the work driven. It's like, do more, get more, accomplish more. And the truth is, where are you going with all this? So if we don't take the time to really restore our sense of soulfulness and self, it's about nothing. And then we even lose productivity in the process.
Very much so. Very much so. One of the experiences I know you have over and over and over again is after you speak to an organization and you're doing the book signing afterwards, that so many people want to express to you the value, something that landed for them that made a difference. And that's been your journey all along. It was my experience of you as when you were a professor in college and I was a student, my life was shifted because you helped me see life from a different perspective. What are you finding, Jeff, is perhaps one of the more common stories, ailments, pains, challenges that people are experiencing some relief from? Something that they may think is their own, but you're discovering through hearing it from so many people might be actually a common challenge or pain point.
Rupert Sheldrake talks about morphic resonance. I know you're familiar with that. The notion basically that if you take a tuning fork and you bang it, and you hold another tuning fork next to that first tuning fork, the second begins to vibrate at exactly the same pitch as the first. So we live in a world in which we as tuning forks, as finely tuned human beings, resonate at the pitch of the world in which we exist. So after my talks, people come up to me and for a while they've had a chance to resonate at a different frequency. And I think what I'm hearing from them often is, wow, I really wasn't aware that living a life like that is possible. Because so many of us simply are born and raised in a world that's vibrating at a certain reality, that our spectrum of possibility is limited. So we buy into, out of college, into graduate school, into law school or business school. Then we get the 9-to-5 job, and then we buy the nice car. Then we get a condo, then we get a big house, then we get a family, and then we get kids. Then we get sick, and then we die. Wish we had retirement, missed it. But you know, that is the world. I'm always amazed at people that only have, and this is true for America. I saw just the other day, the average American, despite what we're allowed, only chooses to take about 3 to 5 vacation days a year. Blows my mind. So people come often to me after my talks and say, wow, that's incredible. I see now that my soul is capable of such a larger, grander vision of life that I may not quit.
Right.
But you know, I'm going to insist that I'm allowed to expand beyond this shoebox, in this stack of shoebox they've got me stuck in. You know, I'm going to see if I can demand a little bit more creativity and wiggle room at work. I'm going to see about moving forward in this direction or that direction. But I think I show them a horizon that before was not even visible. And they say, that's kind of where I'd like to go. Interestingly enough, the people that come up to me, by and large, and say that talk really resonated, when I say why, they say, well, maybe this isn't it, but I survived cancer 2 years ago. Or I just lost my family in a car accident. Whatever. It's usually tragedy undergone or tragedy narrowly avoided that wakes people up to the fact that they really want to inhabit a larger life than currently is available to them. Many of them say, and you know what I did then? I started my own company, and now I'm here attending this conference, and I am so happy. Or the other person says, you know, I don't know what the message is, but I hear the same thing from you that I began to understand through my own loss and pain.
So it sounds like a validation. Like they're hearing you speak and they're saying, oh, I thought it was just perhaps me who was feeling this effervescence, this larger aperture opening up of life. And
am I going crazy? I get that. I think I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
And I go, no, you're not. You're wearing a really cheap suit that you bought off the rack. You know, it wasn't fitted to you. And if it was fitted to you, you've grown out of it.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to allow yourself to expand. So I think that's what's being asked of all of us, is not to allow ourselves, our lives, our professions to be constrained by the morphically resonant predominating paradigm. and say our lives, our souls, our world, our political situation, our environment demands all of us to take on the next adventure,
Yeah.
to take the next step in growth, because we will not continue to survive as human beings or as a species on the planet unless we do.
And have you found any? I'd imagine you've met resistance within companies or organizations or even in people's own lives. But there's this sense of rallying people around a deeper sense of possibility and then sending them back into the workplace. And they might meet some resistance there, they might meet some friction there, but it seems worth it. And it seems like the only option we really have is to shake things up and create some rough edges out there.
Yeah, I've actually, to be honest, I've had some responses from meeting planners who said that, not has to happen often.
Yeah.
But afterwards, they're a little bit cold because they have in their minds a rigid structure. They wanted someone to come in and cheerlead for the advancement of their rigidity. And I'm not doing that. I'm saying as an
Right.
organization, move, change, grow, adapt. And if the individual is part of a rigid structure, and I'm saying you advance, expand, excel, the message may lead to a reduction in their workforce. On the other hand, the majority of my clients know what I'm going to talk about. They say, yeah, we need to be reintroduced to a possible vision for us as an organization.
Yes.
And then people say, that was great.
And rigidity is doomed to fail anyway.
Yeah.
So, it can't last because everything's changing and rigidity ends up breaking
Yes.
under a changing world.
It was Jack Welch that said, when the world outside our organization changes faster than the rate of change inside our organization, we fail.
Yeah.
So we have no choice but to exceed the external rate of change so that we become leaders, not followers, or become antiquated and vestigial and fall off like the tail that no longer is necessary.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I've watched you as you've been watching me and all of our friends. This happens within community of dear friends. We watch each other transform and shift and grow and evolve. And I've watched you soften. Your attention to what matters seems to be shifting. And rather than me put my imagination on that, what I think that's about, what is that about for you? How is life transforming for you these days? How is adventure perhaps different than adventure used to be?
Well, I guess in all honesty, I think my ego is just shriveling. I like to think that maybe it's expanding and I'm not aware of it, but I'm just less interested in my stories. I'm, my incredible good looks are starting to fade. I can't believe that my athletic physique is altering somewhat. I think the Buddhists talk about how the dissolution of the human form being, even losing our the capacity to think remarkably acutely, all that stuff is a gift. Because we cease to attach importance to our physicality and our desires and the possibilities of things we might accomplish, and our consciousness becomes more oceanic, where the person around us is as important as us. Our children perhaps are even more important than us. Our friends, our family, all that supersedes our attachment to me. Can I get this? Can I get that? I'd like to be on TV. I'd like to have another book. I'd like to be whatever. That stuff just becomes really unimportant because the body is starting to fall apart anyway. You won't be here much longer. So what really matters is, again, that appreciation of life, which is to me just life appreciating itself. We become the vehicles for life appreciating itself. Yeah. I like to think I'm becoming more mystical as I age because there's less of me here, but there's more of me everywhere else.
So I have to mention that this harkens to the comment that you made to one of our groups that we were working with. I think it was a Microsoft group, but it was top level. And your comment was that we're here to talk about the ineffable, but it's the only effing stuff that really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's less about the bottom line, although that companies have to survive and such. But it is more about how you get there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, my favorite quote is still, you use your finger to point at the moon, but you would be a fool to confuse your finger with the moon. And all the stuff we call our lives really points to something beyond our lives to which our allegiance truly must lie.
Yeah.
That's where our spirits and our souls reside. And if we confuse the means with the end, if we confuse this madness which is life with the gift we have of consciousness, then we're missing out. And so many of us never get to that point. You know, we die still clutching our time card in our hands. What a shame is that?
Because there's nothing to say. In fact, your experience has been, I believe, that you recognize that the organizations, the individuals, the human beings, the success comes from paying attention to all of it, not the end result, but really paying attention to all of it along the line. So you don't have to give up success or give up efficiency or effectiveness, but you actually gain more of that through being more attentive to the relationships and to the aliveness of the work itself.
Yeah, I would think so. And I would think certainly at different ages we have different desires. Certainly in the more active, engaged part of one's life, that's the only way to run an organization or a life. And, you know, I'm just speaking to my point in life, being over 60. I'm actually less interested in helping organizations be successful than individuals finding their path in this great journey of life. But certainly having success and confidence that contributes to a healthy being is essential. And I hope our corporations and our public service officials all do a great job and have fun while they're playing the game, but never forget it's only a game.
Which brings me to your current work. So you know, you still are doing the management work and the motivational speaking and the whatever we decided to call it, the cheerleading, spiritual cheerleader. Is that it?
Sometimes I forget, cosmic cheerleader.
Cosmic cheerleader. Yeah. You are working with Aleppo Deng, one of the lost boys of Sudan, and you and he have a two-man stage show called Across Worlds. And I've just watched you put so much of your love and attention and energy into that, even though it is not a big, you know, profit maker. It's not something that... So it feels like that's in alignment with what you're saying now. You're less and less interested in, you know, the creating organizational success as helping people find a richer experience of life. What's the overall vision for Across Worlds? Why do you do that?
Well, just because listeners may not be fully aware, Aleppo Deng, as I mentioned earlier, is a survivor of the genocide in Sudan who came to America and had some challenges here. We began working together. He wrote a LA Times bestseller called They Poured Fire on Us from the Sky, had been doing some local speaking, and I decided I wanted to help him become a more successful speaker, just as something I wanted to do. But in working with him and spending time with him, I really wanted to spend more time with him, recognized he probably didn't have the wherewithal to do this speaking thing, which is pretty competitive, and you have to have a kind of marketing savvy on his own. We began to discover that our stories, though very different, converged around some very key learnings. And so the idea was to go beyond traditional speaking. We originally thought having he and I on the stage speaking together would be fun. Why not have a play where in this unfolding of this presentation, you see two strangers meeting, and it's entirely true, portraying how our friendship evolved and how we came to recognize the importance of telling a story profoundly, truthfully, listening non-judgmentally, and discovering the highest common denominator. So it became a program around two things. One is the power and impact of genuine, authentic storytelling, and the second is a word that his father taught him in Sudan in his native language called Dinka, called Akop Cow. And the story unfolds where he learns that Akop Cow is not some sweet nectar he's going to be given at the completion of the job he's doing at his father's side while herding cattle. But Akop Cow in his father's mind was the gift that we receive by doing meaningful work that's important to us at a soulful level in the company of those we care about. And that was a great message for all human beings, especially organizations. So the beauty of this work is, one, it brings an awareness of the suffering and genocide in other parts of the world, which isn't a downer, but it ennobles us because it makes us realize there's some work for us to attend to by going beyond our small, concentric, ever-diminishing circle of concerns.
It's the suffering that helps us all pay attention again, that you were talking about earlier. We need the suffering to pay attention.
Exactly. And it reminds us of the importance of telling our story in an uninhibited and uncalculated way, in a disclosive way to another human being, because in that process we discover things that we share, and that breaks down the illusion of separation. So all these things said to me, tell the story, do this work, and the final mess, a cow, the most important reminder of all, do work that feeds your soul. Make sure you care about those you work with, and discover how your life becomes not an accident, but an amazing adventure.
If I'd like to end with a sense, Jeff, of if you didn't need to make a living, you could do whatever you wanted, and there were no restrictions in your ability to reach out to or connect with as many populations as possible. What's the work you'd be most drawn doing, or would it change at all? What would you do different?
I think I'm in the enviable situation of having found the work that delights me most, that I am most qualified for. Listeners can tell I'm fairly, I can't find the word now, loquacious, right? And enthusiastic.
Yes, that's the word I was thinking.
Yeah. So I'd love to do everything I'm doing without having to market any of it.
Yeah.
I would love to, and I am now. I don't do a whole lot I do virtually right now no outward marketing. The phone rings frequently enough that I can live magnificently, though humbly, in North County. The Across Worlds work, I would like to see more acceptance for that, but to perform, to speak, to teach, to explore ideas. And as I just came back from the Himalayas 2 weeks ago, leading a trek in the high mountains there, to be able to physically lead those expeditions a while longer. So I'm doing everything I've ever wanted to do. That little kid in New Jersey that wanted to have an adulthood that was involved with nomads and pirates and bandits and climb the mountains and all that, and speak to large audiences, telling stories. That kid has found the life he was dreaming of.
So just more of it with less needing to market, which you're not doing a lot of anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Okay, this does lead me to one other question. You mentioned having just come back from the Indian Himalayas, leading a trek there, where you got to climb, or the group got to climb, a sacred peak, a pilgrimage site, a very difficult climb. And I was struck by your recounting of the fact that your knees were bothering you, and that you were quite okay with not climbing that peak, and just playing a different role than you've played in the past. And it seems to go in alignment with what you've always said to groups when I've heard you speak, which is, it is not necessarily the people standing on top of mountains that change the world. It's the people at the ground level. So that's shifting for you, and it sounds like that's okay with you, that you're get to play a supportive role and less of the Indiana Jones heroic role.
And this goes back to a question you asked before. I didn't feel fully satisfied with my answer. Yes, absolutely. I don't need to climb that mountain. The fact that my 15-year-old son made the climb, that my group, almost everyone, successfully made the climb, that was my success. It's like when you throw a party, you may not be out there having all the fun in the living room. You're in the kitchen heating up reheating the hors d'oeuvres from Trader Joe's or pouring the wine, whatever, to make sure. But your success is not having had a great conversation. It's having had others have those amazing conversations. That's how I felt. But I also have to say this, that there are two mountains on either side of that one peak.
Right.
The one on the right, Chakri, is a phenomenal tower, much more challenging to climb. I had led the first expedition up that tower 4 or 5 years ago. On the left is a peak called Yeshi Peak that I named after climbing it for the first time.
After your daughter.
After my daughter on her 9th birthday. So, yes, there is a time for us to be leading organizations, a time for us to be accomplishing our goals. Hopefully not ego-driven, but with some kind of great dream of what we might do. And to do those things, and to lead organizations, and create change. And then there's a time that we sit back and say, you know what? You do it. Here's how.
Yes.
You do it. Now that's success.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jeff.
Always a pleasure, my dear friend.
Oh, I love you, man. Thank you. This has been beautiful. To learn more about Jeff Salz or to book him for speaking engagements, executive coaching, and organizational training, and to get more information about his across-world stage show with the Lefo Deng, you can visit him online at www.jeffsalz.com. To work with me as a guide for your personal or leadership development, or to attend one of my workshops, you can visit me at www.chessedwards.com. I'm Chess Edwards, and this is Beyond the Noise, conversations at the heart of modern-day living.